Okay, everyone, I hope you have your seatbelts buckled because we have an incredible amount of content that we're going to cover today in an hour. And I am so just excited to be able to be here and to be able to spend some time with you. So what we're going to do in this session today is we're going to do a speed run through the best of Microsoft Ignite. And I've got a deck of content which is really, really full of all sorts of different types of topics, and we're going to cover a lot of them. And about half the deck is hidden content because I had to dial it back somewhere. And I'm going to make this deck available to you all afterwards. So I think you're going to really find this a great experience. You're going to get a lot of content. It's going to feel like you got hit by a fire hose. That's how I've been feeling for about the last 2 weeks as I've been putting this content together. And I want you to be able to have access to all of this afterwards. So we're going to make that available as a take home. As we get started, I'm going to start a poll, and I'd love to hear what are the most interesting things that you want to learn more about today as we have this conversation, so I don't miss or skip anything. So I'm going to launch that, launching our poll. There we go. All right, so if everyone please select your top 3 interest areas and submit. I would love to see your results from that. Say mine. Okay, I'm seeing Copilot Studio leading here. Fabric. There's a vote for Quantum. That might have been mine. Cool, thank you. Keep submitting that if you have not yet responded to the poll. Would love to see your top 3 interest areas. Keep that coming along while I do some introduction here. So, okay, nice to meet everybody. I'm Nathan Wisnowski. I'm Concurrency's Chief Technology Officer. I would love to connect with all of you. This is my LinkedIn QR code. So follow me on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter that gets released every single week on AI trends and technology leadership. There's about 25 previous newsletters with all sorts of interesting content. I'm sure you would find that interesting, so make sure you connect with me. I'd love to be in your network and talk with you and collaborate and communicate. And today, what I'm going to be doing is going through the best of Ignite. That's why you're all here. And you can see I have quite the list. In fact, that's not even the entire list, but I have quite the list of things that we're going to dig into. One reason I want to make sure I give you the deck as a result of this is because I have links to all sorts of different types of content as we go. So one of the best pieces of content that they release every single time they do Ignite and Microsoft Build is the Book of News. And the Book of News is kind of like an index of where you can find stuff. It doesn't always include everything, oddly enough, but it includes a lot. And it's really helpful to be able to focus in on your technology discipline area and to find interesting things that are going to be meaningful to you as you start exploring things that have happened at Ignite. So we're going to hit this sequentially. I'm going to move really fast. If I don't, I'm going to make it through maybe only in the top 4 things. So we're going to do a lot of content here. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. I might not hit them during the session, or I might just stay late and answer some of those questions as we go. But my goal is to get you guys out of here right on time and make this available for you as a take-home. All right. So keynote, let's start with that. So what happened in the keynote? Well, there's 2 main things that Satya really started to hit on in the keynote. The first was this idea of Copilot as the UI for AI. And I liked that language because it was really about how do we surface the capabilities of AI to a broad ecosystem of employers, employees, partners, and business relationships that we have, and do so in a way that keeps dropping the bar of our base skill necessary to take advantage of the platform. And it's a view in terms of how Microsoft's perceiving how they're going to market with their AI capabilities. They're not launching an app store on your phone per se. They're not going to the kind of open market in a way that maybe you're seeing like OpenAI starting to think about it. They're really thinking about Copilot as this engine for people to interact with not only the base capabilities of Copilot, but also the capabilities available via Copilot Studio and agents that exist underneath both of those vehicles. And you're even seeing that quite a bit, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, how the commodity, the adoption of AI systems for every individual within your business is becoming really straightforward for an individual to be able to do themselves, not just having to hand that off to a technology person. Even creating an agent is something that they're starting to make an activity that every person within your organization can do, which is really, really exciting. So I love this idea of framing up the accessibility of AI via Copilot as a vehicle to do that, and then orienting this idea of the Copilot control system, which we'll talk a little bit about in a moment. Now, as he flips that on its head, he talks about the Copilot and AI stack. And when you think about the Copilot AI stack, he's really talking about how we're building AI systems. So if the previous slide was about how do I enable adoption for every employee within my organization, the other side of it is how do I enable a set of tools that enables us to create AI systems that are true product engineering and enable us to be able to amplify the core mission of our business for end customers. So a core component of what we'll talk about today is some of the things that he has in here: the dev tools, the AI platform, the data platform, the infrastructure, the accessibility from the cloud and from the edge. All of this is really meaningful. And many of the capabilities that they talk about at Ignite amplify each of those different vertical structures and horizontal structures that exist in the context of making AI real, not only for every employee's adoption, but also for building AI systems that enable us to take AI to our customer base. So you'll see these both sprinkled across the different topics that we'll be covering in the session today. So the first thing we'll talk about is Copilot and its relationship to things like Pages and Actions that were announced at Microsoft Ignite. So the first thing that they talked about in the context of Copilot, I'm really excited about because it was a big ask of mine at the last MVP Summit, was this idea of why can't I save prompts? Like, why can't I take a prompt that I've been working with and save it in a way that I can get access to later, and then also share with other people that I might be collaborating with in an easy way. Now, we've been using some off-the-shelf tools, some open source tools to be able to make that possible, but I'm really glad to see them starting to integrate this right within the Copilot interface, both Microsoft prompts that they have been developing, but also prompts that you are saving. So for example, a prompt that I've been using is around scheduling meetings. Like someone will come to me and say, hey, do you have time on your calendar? And I'll say, yeah, but let me look at my calendar and find the right times. Well, I've developed a prompt that I use with my calendar to return 5 key times with a bunch of blockers on it. Like, don't schedule it here. Look at these kinds of things. Like, you'd instruct an intern to go find times for you. Now that prompt can be saved, easily referenced by me, and it can take next steps right within the context of the Copilot interface. And I thought that was a great way to kick it off because it really starts to take some of the feedback people have had with Copilot, bring that forward to the usage of amplifying that within the adoption within enterprise. Another exciting thing about Copilot that they announced at Ignite is responses from Copilot that follow different modalities like bar charts and score and rich text, rich code, vehicles to experience it in a way that's not just a text response. From like, I'm looking at an Excel workbook, give me a graph of the content inside that Excel workbook, launch a Power BI report. Copilot is now becoming a vehicle for not just text responses, but also collaboration around rich content. And I think the more that kind of content becomes a real-time activity that happens within the Copilot conversation, the more that's going to enable us to take action faster and then also collaborate on it. You can see this piece right here where it says create new page. There's a new feature you might have experienced within Copilot, which is called Copilot Pages. And that's the idea of taking this thing I just had an interaction with Copilot around, and then making this not just an interaction that's private to me, but making an interaction that is shared with others. So you can see how that moved from this interaction that I had inside of Copilot to this page that's now present. This could be inside of a team, or it could be an individual thing that I'm then sharing with other people. But then this becomes prompt export content that then is collaborative in the context of a loop, which is a sort of new collaborative capability that exists within as a kind of an adjacent technology to Teams. It's also a new way of surfacing that information, which is has parity between like thick client and non-thick client experience. Has a lot in common with Notion if you've worked with Notion before. And Loop is this extension of the prompt. So you take the prompt to export something, or Pages is, and that content then is available in a collaborative space with Pages. So you're going to start to see that light up within your tenant if it hasn't already, and start exploring it. It's going to feel a little weird because it's like another piece of content. It's like, it's not Word, it's not Excel, it's not a PowerPoint, it's a Loop component. And at the end of the day, it's just like one of those other things, except it's more modern in the way that you're interacting in a collaborative way with it. So note that that's something that they talked a lot about. Now, building on that, something that I was really excited about is this idea of Copilot Actions. What are Copilot Actions? Copilot Actions are essentially thinking about activities I perform on a regular basis and then telling Copilot to do those things for me. So like, let's say like every Tuesday, I need to prepare this report, or every Wednesday, I need to send this file to this person that needs it outside of my organization, or I share this content, or I send out my schedule so people know what I'm doing this week, or I'm going to be on the road and I know I'm going to be on the road and I want to send out these updates. What Copilot Actions are taking those prompts and causing the AI agent to perform those prompts or activities for you without you having to trigger it, like essentially scheduling that activity on your behalf. So regularly summarize the communications. Maybe I come in the morning, I want to already see the summary of my inbox right in front of me. Or maybe I want to create these assets every single time this trigger fires, and I do so on an individual basis. Like every single time I see this thing, I want to trigger this activity, move this document, or take this action. I can now have that trigger just based upon me building a prompt around it. And where I think this is really powerful is that next step around delegating activities to an AI agent. Like if you think about prompting as delegating an activity, we're doing that as it comes, right? I'm working within BizChat and I'm actively delegating an activity to an AI agent. In the context of Copilot Actions, what's happening is I'm preparing that in advance. I'm causing it to take action based upon something that I've already prepared and I want it to do. So I'm no longer like triggering it manually. I'm triggering it based on a schedule, and it's doing it potentially even autonomously on my behalf. So this is something you should expect to land in your tenant in Q1 or even in even early Q1 that you can start to take advantage of. So now, Copilot, one of the questions companies have said to me is, how do I know like how this is being used? How do I know that it's actually providing value? And I think this is one of the greatest needs within the deployment of Copilot is their ability to relate the activities and the enablement of Copilot, which is not a non-significant dollar amount that you're licensing, and align that to how do I prove that there was value? And many of us who use Copilot are like, duh, like, of course there's value, like you're already experiencing it. What we're trying to do here is then show that. So Copilot Analytics shows the business outcome relationships associated with Copilot usage. So there's all these different metrics that you can start to line this up with. So one of the examples they showed was aligning sales win rate with Copilot usage. In doing so in subcomponents. So saying like, hey, here's Teams. How many times have people summarized a meeting with Copilot? How many times have they summarized a chat or rewrote a message or done intelligent recap or used business chat? And for every app, we can get the down statistics of those activities and the people that are using them. And why that's so powerful is then we can cross-reference that against activities that are happening with those individuals and cross-reference it with their job performance. We could say, well, the people in this group that are performing really well, they do all these things. They summarize the meeting and they send them out immediately afterward. They have a trigger that they're firing based upon that meeting having been completed, and then the things that we would have asked them to do, like summarize it, take action, They would have done that manually. Now they can do that automated. The people doing that, they're having better business performance, or they're not. Like, you might find that out too. So I find that the more that we get this information in a way that's not taking advantage of anyone, but the more we get it to be able to show what the top quartile individuals are doing and how AI is actually force multiplying them, that's going to enable us to really have confidence as we push forward to enable this for the rest of the organization. So Copilot dashboard, Copilot analytics, super useful. So this is a view of that relationship between Copilot usage and deals won. So like low usage versus high usage versus medium usage, we can show, oh, there is an alignment. Like high usage of Copilot, all things being equal, right? There might be some other delineation we need to think about here, but usage of Copilot, all things being equal, with the insights that we brought together, we're seeing a higher degree of deals won, or it might be a higher degree of general productivity against a task. Like people are doing a customer service task. The people who are using Copilot regularly are better at their customer service tasks. Maybe we're seeing higher customer sat with those individuals. We're seeing better responses. So super valuable capability, and the more they apply value to the analytics part of this, the better they're going to be able to drive real adoption within organizations. Same kind of view here. The idea behind, I see a dollar value, the dollar impact associated with high Copilot usage versus low Copilot usage. That's really a cross-referencing of those two things. A little bit more about that. You can get that later, spend some time with it. You can even customize the hourly rate, which is, I think, a nice kind of capability. Okay, Copilot control system. What is this? This is like the blanket across the whole ecosystem, okay? So it's talking about the things we just mentioned, but also talking about other governance guardrails and security guardrails that exist in the context of the Copilot ecosystem. So things that you've seen happen with Copilot recently have been like being able to dial back what is in the semantic index and what is not in the semantic index, being able to apply rights management rules, being able to dial in like who can use what and who can access what and what features can they use. Copilot control system's goal is to be able to facilitate additional governance controls around the Copilot ecosystem as we roll it out, versus maybe like a year ago where it was like, whoa, like you kind of turn it on and that's it. Like now you're in a position where you have a lot more hands on the dial. So as like we're really hitting a point, like I guess what I've experienced is we're really hitting a point where like most businesses are seriously looking at their mass rollout approach. Even, maybe mass is maybe the wrong word, but like 500 user plus, 1,000 user plus, they're pushing forward, but they want these things like analytics in example to exist, and they want the governance controls to exist. These are the things that are going to enable you to do it safely and well. So I'm glad they're investing there. Okay, something they talked about as well is this idea of SharePoint agents. So what are SharePoint agents? Let's say you have a SharePoint document library. Right in SharePoint, there's this button where it says, okay, cool. Build an agent that summarizes, that's an FAQ of all the things that are in this document library, or summarize any key highlights that are existing within this document library. Fascinating, right? Like how fast you can create agents based upon known content. Flip that around, Copilot Studio is kind of doing it from the opposite direction, but essentially what this is doing is it's building a Copilot Studio chatbot. Right? Copilot student agent that can perform activities against content in a SharePoint list. There's this create agent button here too that also kind of goes to the same place. Just making the creation of intelligence agents even more accessible than it was before. Okay. Oh man, if there's one thing that I was excited about from Copilot, it was this. I was totally a Star Trek fan growing up. And one of the things that I was asked was like, wait, like, isn't that guy an alien? Like, how are you talking with all these aliens and it sounds like they're speaking English? Like, what's going on here? And I remember, what was it? Star Trek, the Undiscovered Country, or something like that, where like Kronos had blown up and they were trying to go visit this. Oh, they had to go to this like this penal colony, okay? And they said that the universal translator will be recognized, right? So they had to like speak in a foreign language or speak in Klingon to go visit them. But like this idea of like, I'm speaking to you, you're speaking to me, and it sounds like me. So they announced this, and I saw this like 6 months ago at the MVP Summit, and I was like blown away. This idea that like you're speaking to me, I'm speaking to you, but it doesn't sound like a robot. It actually sounds like me saying a different language. Crazy talk. Like this is so cool. Like the idea that, and I got a link in it so you can go watch it later, but like um Marco, one of the leaders of this, actually demoed this live in Teams. You can do it in custom dev. You can do it right in Teams. This idea that like you're speaking a language, I'm speaking, that's this like real-time translation, and it sounds like you, to me, is like so close to the Star Trek Universal Translator. It's not even funny. I'm excited about this just because of the accessibility that it creates for people, the ability for individuals with differing languages to communicate with each other real time is incredible, just incredible. So check this one out. I think there's like, if there's one like this is so cool, that was like a moment for me when I saw the interpreter agent. Okay, so building on the conversation about Copilot, let's talk about Copilot Agents in Studio. So the goal with Copilot Studio and its relationship to Copilot usage is this idea of building agents. And the idea around agents is independent agents that perform an activity that can work together. So looking below, you can see things like next best action agents or lead qualifying or expense approval or data entry, this idea that these all perform a thing. And it may perform a thing in the context of a lightweight effort, or it might be a ground up, like maybe this guy right here, that next best action agent, maybe you built that fully custom and your Copilot agents that you built non-custom and low code are interacting with it and they're exchanging information. That's the future, people. The idea, like we have all these agents, that's like a mini org chart of delegated activities within our organizations. And I'm handing it off to them to do things. And with my applications, I'm building forms and grids and activities that interact with each of those agents. So powerful. And the future of this is so amazing. Like the idea that I have individuals self-creating agents and I have full code product development all working together to achieve real outcomes, and then building it on increasingly accessible data platforms like Dataverse or Fabric, it becomes really exciting, the amount of impact that we can drive. So there's in here, I have a link to that particular session. I think you'd find that really, really useful. I'm not going to cover any of this right now, but there's a lot of new things in Copilot Studio. If there's a platform that's getting a lot of additional investment, Copilot Studio, Copilot Studio, Copilot Studio, like it's getting a lot of investment just simply because it's making AI agent capabilities really accessible to individuals. And one of the ways that that's proven to me is you're starting to see this lit up right within your Copilot experience for an individual purpose. You go into the Copilot experience, and it essentially leads you through the process of building an agent. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't quite work yet because like maybe you haven't wired up the data sources or errors out or whatever. Work through it, man. Like it's doing some cool stuff. I've already built a whole slew of agents in really short periods of time, and the skill to be able to do this, anyone can do it. Now, does it need governance? Yes, that's why the Copilot control system exists. That's why you need to do enablement activities. That's why you need to think about what the kind of cross web of how all my agents work together is going to be. But it is a really powerful time for us to drive aggregate activity within an organization. So really cool stuff. Here is an example of the ability to look at the content that exists underneath Copilot Studio, and then being able to indicate, is this an official source of information? So you kind of like bounce up certain information in the rankings. And I think that's going to get additional like investment, but like being able to bounce up capabilities in the rankings so you can prioritize certain content for prioritized responses, and maybe ones are sort of secondary content. So you haven't played much with Copilot Studio. This is the interface for Copilot Studio. And then there's a testing experience over here to play with your agent. You can see it's asking questions and it's providing the reference and so on. Things that you would expect from an AI bot that's performing Q&A. You can also see the actions capability, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Keep sticking with me. There's a lot here. Hopefully this is still interesting. Okay, now we're going to move into, there's analytics around the agents. So you spin up an agent, you say, well, man, like I built all the agents, which of these are actually used? And how is it working? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? I love that they're building a lot of investment around the analytics of agents too, like not just analytics around base Copilot adoption, but analytics around agents. This idea of building a help desk agent, knowing what the outcomes of it were. Are they being responded to? What are the errors? What document sources are tied most to abandonment? Like if they're using this document, it responded this way, it didn't work. If they're using this document, it responded with high quality. We can start to be able to focus the energy of the people maintaining the content, which is really the key of this. Like anytime someone's building an agent, the agent doesn't work usually because the content's muddled. It's not usually because the agent's screwed up. Like a lot of times it's just like we put too much content into the basket and it can't figure out which is which. Like let's focus our content toward the thing we're trying to answer. So analytics help us to be able to do that. This is an example of being able to pull content from other sources. So being able to, and then take action on it. So being able to build a workflow, understand the knowledge sources, take action, or sorry, list content from that knowledge source, and then build a structure that allows us to take action on that agent, and then map it in a really kind of intuitive activity map. So let's just go from, I'm describing this in a very simple Q&A format to, wait, I want to kind of manage some of the dials of this thing. I want to work with topics. I want to adjust it. I need to know what happened. You'd be surprised how much is available for low code into pro code in the context of Copilot Studio before you're truly building something from scratch, from the ground up. This is where a lot of investment has been put to enable every person and every low code person to be able to get tremendous impact, and then have these tie in with work that people are doing in the pro code space. Like maybe I want my index to be in Azure AI search, but the rest of the app is in Copilot Studio. You can do that now. So a lot's going on, which allows us to even further lower the bar, because they announced that Copilot Studio is available as pay-as-you-go. Why is it so valuable? Simply because people build a lot of agents and they're testing them out. They don't want to have like a base cost they're having to pay for every single agent. They just want to pay on the drip. So Copilot Studio is also available in total pay-as-you-go, like pay as you use it. You don't use it, you don't pay. If you use it a lot, you pay more. And there's reservations that you can get for them. I think this is just another way to reduce the sort of hurdles that you need to be able to get into building intelligent AI agents. Okay. Also, engagement of Purview into Azure AI agents, or sorry, both Azure AI agents and Copilot Studio agents. So if you're using Purview to look for things like unethical use, sensitive document content, sensitivity labels, what's being accessed, what should or shouldn't be, so what interactions are happening for different types of apps. This is all information that's now being able to be available to you as a security team, and really to protect your environment from some of these negative things happening, and know that it occurred. Like, we don't want money laundering. That would be bad. Let's try to stay away from that. So the security team, there's a ton of content on Purview. I don't have a lot of Purview content in this deck, but I do want you to be aware that that's something that we have. Okay. Same thing with Activity Explorer. Actually knowing who did it is useful too. So like, hey, I've got a person from my team interacting with my bot. What did they do? Who was doing it? Especially like they tried to jailbreak it. I need to know who did that. Like, I'm not going to hide that information. I want to be able to solve for that problem. So being able to have great information from Purview on that. Okay, something that they announced in this, which I have yet to explore more, but I am excited about, is this idea of pre-built agents. So pre-built agents is about like, hey, like everybody asks for an employee self-service agent. Like, can we just have that? Like, can we just light that up pretty easily? Or a project manager agent sounds super interesting. I was playing around with that a little bit. There's some really interesting things they're doing to like launch pre-built agents. There's also some industry agents that I'll talk about later. So really like accelerating the go-to-market of some of these like basic capabilities. So an employee self-service agent, we know it's based on this type of content. So let's build one already that we can launch pretty quickly for a customer that's based on this kind of the prepared set of content that I have as a template. Really what it is a template. Like, I know that I need these things to have an employee self-service agent for this kind of content. Let's help them through the process of constructing that agent right within Copilot Studio. So fascinating, exciting capabilities. By the way, if you haven't played with this Create Agents button that you probably have in Copilot right now, that's a great place to start. Super low impact way to start building agents on your own. Already should be available in your tenant. Okay. Tons of out-of-box interactions and agents being constructed by partners like ServiceNow or Workday that you don't have to build. So like I was talking with a company yesterday, they're like, what should we build? Don't build things you don't have to build. Someone else is going to build it for you. Don't build it. But if it's a competitive advantage, build it, because that's what allows you to beat out your competitors. So there's a lot of content on that. I have a bunch of hidden slides on some of these. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to make sure you have access to that content. Okay, phew. All right, we've got a lot more to go. Agents and Power Automate. So keep with me. We're forwarding now, continuing down the path of I built agents. I can do it self-service. Now we got Power Automate stuff. Oh man, there's so many cool things in the Power Automate space. So Power Automate is about like leaning on actions, leaning on automations to do things. So like here is an example of Dow's invoicing agent. They intake an invoice, they read the content, they retrieve knowledge, they compose a report, they send out discrepancy emails where things are missing. So the goal is take things that a person used to do, decompose it into sub-steps, look for how I can use an AI agent to perform those activities. So if I'm doing this thousands of times a year, maybe I can have an AI agent perform that activity rather than a person for a huge percentage of it, and then I can focus the person on the right activities. Why this is useful is so much of this can now be done with low code. So rather than having to be like a huge project, sometimes it can be something that has a portion of low code that's built right into it, and then other portions might require true product engineering. We have to really think about like, where do we really invest our time? This is a great example of how that's possible. So example of doing that. Okay, I want you to see this. So this is the record with Copilot capability. So Copilot has an ability to record not only your screen, but the intention behind it. So essentially what happens is you say, I'm going to record a set of activities. Copilot records those activities, but you're also talking as those activities. You're like describing it like you would describe it to a person. So if I had an intern over here and I said, I want you to do this thing, you say, cool, ready, steady, go. And I'm going to walk through that process with you. And I'm not just going to be like doing it like I would a legacy RPA tool. I'm going to describe it with intentionality so the person knows why I'm doing things. The new Copilot automations can build these with understanding that intentionality, and not just the screen input, but the video and audio input about what the intent is, that allows for self-healing within the process and allows for it to record it in a more capable way. So this is pretty cool. This is going to be available for every Power Automate instance for you to run on these desktop automations with, and cloud automations with. So take advantage of this, man. This is going to be really cool. And it's like the next level of RPA, I guess it's kind of a way to say it. So a lot of content on this. I have 4 other slide recordings of this kind of thing in the deck that I want you to be able to take advantage of, but it would, would use up the rest of our time doing that. Okay, so that's a lot of Fabric and Power Automate. What I want you to take from that was we have a responsibility in our organizations to bring AI adoption to every employee, so we can force multiply them within our organizations. And Ignite is just doubling down on that it's more and more accessible. Now let's do so in the data space. Fabric is about that. Okay, so Fabric is about how do we make that available? Fabric hasn't been around for too long, but it's at least over a year and a half now, and it's in use in over 70% of the Fortune 500. Now, why was Microsoft brilliant in this? Because they made every Power BI customer a Fabric customer. So well over 16,000 people have taken, or companies have taken Power BI, now extended that into Fabric and are using that as their data platform. Something that was really exciting that they announced in this session was they not only can use Fabric as a data warehousing platform, but also as a database, an operational database experience. Whoa, like mind blown, right? Like what Fabric is not just a data warehousing technology, it is now going to be a operational database platform. Yes, that's the goal. So as you start building on Fabric, realize that its goal is to make data access accessible for everyone. its goal is to enable AI flows and activities to perform and activate against Fabric databases. So they announced, for example, SQL database on Fabric, deploy, scale, without having to worry about the infrastructure that sits underneath. It's really trying to get to like true grid computing in a sense that like I've provisioned capacity and I'm not having to worry about anything that exists underneath that. So Fabric is not just data warehouse now. Fabric's also about bringing in operational databases into its purview. One thing I love about what they talk about with Fabric is they've done a really nice job of building the data web, the data exploration experience right within the Fabric place. I used to have to say, go to Purview to get that information. Now that's right within the context of the exploratory capabilities right within Fabric. So like this, take a screenshot of it. Happy to take some more time on this later. Maybe we'll do an event on Fabric, but there's a ton of content on this within Ignite that is worth exploring. But you can just see all the features that they're releasing. The OneLake catalog is now available. This wasn't available before. This is also a previous Purview feature, now available right within Fabric that you can take advantage of. Now, they also then announced two other kind of big things: this industry solutions capability and the addition of partner workloads. They didn't really have these in the boxes before. It used to just be these five. Now they have these new lines within the sort of Fabric one-pager. What do they mean by industry solutions? Things like environmental sustainability. They're preparing Fabric to be like, okay, cool. When you onboard this data, we already have an industry solution that will analyze that data and provide you insights. And that's super meaningful just because like we didn't have to invent ESG from the ground up. This is something that exists. We can have a solution in there that already does it. And if you have the data available in the right format, we can then use the industry solution and the extensibility of AI Copilot on Fabric to be able to have a great experience on it, which I have some more content on in a minute. So something else that they announced in Fabric is source control. So source control in the context of the Fabric configuration and the configuration of the data framework. I think that's just like, it's funny because like I'm like, shouldn't that be a day one thing? Like, shouldn't source control be a day one thing? But now they're enabling that to be something that's within Fabric as well. Okay, database mirroring, tons of new database mirroring features. Why is that meaningful? Just because you have databases somewhere, you want to ease the process of making those databases available for analytics workloads within Fabric. If I can mirror those real time and ease that process so there's no job that's running, it's just always available, at least for my bronze layer or my raw layer, that's now something that's available. It already was available, but they've just simply increased the number of additional sources that are now at true GA. Snowflake, Cosmos Database, Azure SQL, Databricks, etc. Okay, something they spent a ton of time on in the session was using Copilot in Fabric. So right here we have this idea around I'm asking questions against an established schema. This came up this week in a project. We're like, have this big data project. A lot of people need to move data. They have all these reports. It's like, wait, how much of this reporting do we need to build? And how much can we use Fabric with Copilot to do for us? This is a huge jump forward, especially if you do a good job actually planning your data framework ahead of time. So they demoed this experience of looking at this information associated with the country of Italy. They did this for like a challenge. Essentially, it was like Microsoft versus a number of other analytics vendors, and then doing a competition. But one of the reasons I bring this up is because it was a nice way of describing how you can use Copilot to create things. So you take this, blank it out, say, all right, cool. I want to see a view of the trends of GDP over time. They put this real time. This wasn't like a pre-recorded thing. They did the prompt on the right-hand side, and then that GDP growth became a dashboard that was then available for people to interact with. But then that wasn't it. They started to ask other questions. So can you add in this? Can you adjust this? And it became a sort of cascading activity of like adding and modifying aspects of the report, or even asking questions that are centric to the content in the report. They even did this to get insights that they hadn't previously understood, create a page to examine poverty and health. They didn't ask for specific things, just built this on its own. And then it started to think about ratios or life expectancy or like different questions that you might be thinking about, like out-of-pocket health expenditure across these different countries or in different zones or areas of the country, to be able to start to think about like, well, why does this exist? Why was there more poverty here? Was less poverty here? It's really about like, how do I enable data exploration? And Copilot for Fabric's goal is both to enable us to be able to get that insight without us having to spend all day just building a report. Maybe I can get that insight, or what I like to call unintuitive insights, by ways of being able to converse with the data and have the data respond and provide input back to me. And that's where I think this is really going to keep taking steps forward, is it's transitioning us to a different place. So a lot happening here. Okay, I'm going to blast through this NBA one, but this was really interesting. They did have a session with the National Basketball Association as a customer surrounding AI capabilities. And what they've launched in this upcoming season, or are launching, is this new kind of AI-driven insights platform associated with NBA experiences. I know Microsoft has that strong relationship with them. So that'd be something to explore sometime, is like a little bit about how NBA is using it. There's a whole session on it. So if you want to just kind of watch it, kind of just general interesting session about AI-driven outcomes, watch the one about the NBA, because a lot of us are connected to that or have sports teams that we follow in the NBA. Okay, so continuing forward into the Copilot plus AI stack. What Microsoft announced at Azure, or sorry, at Ignite, is this stack that I talked about right at the beginning, this idea of Azure AI Foundry and data and infrastructure, all in the context of an idea of a trustworthy AI. And what that relates to is this picture of AI tooling. So the main announcement was this idea of AI Foundry. Now, it's really a series of tools that existed before, renamed and boxed together. But it is very valuable because it's the idea of thinking about what are all the things I need to be able to construct AI agents in a responsible way in the context of product engineering. So they talked a lot about this because it really focuses on, how do I do this well? How do I investigate building an AI system that also plugs in observability, safety and security, ethical controls, multiple models, content safety, all in the context of one platform. So if you're building AI models from the ground up, Azure AI Foundry is for you. Its whole goal is to facilitate that. And that allows access to things like OpenAI's most recent models, or also a whole cacophony of other models. There's thousands of different other vendors in the catalog. So we always think about OpenAI. It's not the only one, people. Like, there's a whole bunch of other models that are available in that catalog. But what they did in this is they also built an evaluation mechanism to go and look at those models and say, well, which perform better in different types of circumstances, and allowing you to evaluate them in terms of just setting like the ratio between cost and features and usage to be able to determine what's right for a particular application. So this is an example of the catalog. You can go explore that. Look, there's 1,812 models available in the catalog. Like, holy cow, like there's a lot of models available. It's not just about OpenAI. It's about a variety of different things we can take advantage of. You can also see some examples of them starting to build these out. This is from a demo. I'm not going to go into this more. This is another demo. They were talking about, like, how do I kind of build a conversational interface on my public website? And they built this real time. I thought that was really interesting. Seth Juarez was doing that. And then they announced things like AI model fine-tuning, which is sort of taking that next step upon a RAG pattern or an agent pattern, being able to incorporate fine-tuning into the model where it's appropriate for a particular scenario. So there's a lot about that here, as well as the interaction with these collaborations, weights and biases, scale, StratSig, and so on. Okay. They also announced the AI agent service. What is the AI agent service? It's a simplification of how to build and scale AI agents. If that's not using the words used to describe the word. If you're familiar with LangGraph, LangChain, and semantic kernel, it's about making it easier to use things like that, making it easier to build from the ground up true product engineering around AI agents in the context of Azure's AI platform. And it's available in public preview. So you can start taking advantage of that to think about orchestration around how you're building those AI agents and plug in the things that are off the shelf. So one of the things they talk about in the AI agent services, maybe I don't need to build a certain part of orchestration. Maybe I can plug it into a Logic app or an Azure function, or I can plug into something I built in the Copilot Studio ecosystem. All of this then becomes available for people building and constructing related AI agent ecosystems that can be both fully ground up or semi-code solutions that are being taken advantage of. So super cool, especially if you're building things from the ground up. Another thing that they announced was something called structured outputs, which is essentially about like guaranteeing a certain structure to guaranteeing a certain kind of very specific structure coming out of the AI agent. So like maybe I was working with GPT-4 before, that gets responded in like a set of text, but then I have to structure it in JSON. Like this is allowing me to say, this is the output way I want to see this, and you're going to export it this way. So this is the transcript. I have a call summary that's structured in a way in a JSON that I can then take advantage of and pull right into my next step. Okay, they talked a lot about the availability of that real-time audio that we talked about in the context of the Star Trek interpreter. That is also available when you're building something ground up. So if you're building an application completely from the ground up, you want to incorporate those capabilities in real time. That's available to you in the Azure experience, as well as being available in Teams and other places. Lots of new capabilities around risk and safety evaluations. I would highly recommend the session by Sarah Bird. Sarah Bird talked a lot about all the capabilities that Microsoft's building around AI safety. So if you want to deep dive into that, spend some time on Sarah Bird's session. I think you'll find it really valuable. Okay, if you're building things from the ground up, you're probably using GitHub workspaces, Copilot inside of GitHub. Lots of capabilities announced around GitHub. So there's several good sessions around how do I build a secure DevOps lifecycle. I've got a bunch of hidden content. There's just so much on this particular area that you can take advantage of in this space, but around building code, integrating code, deploying code, operating and monitoring code, and then using GitHub Copilot to be able to optimize each of these pieces. One interesting thing they talked about was Copilot Autofix, this idea of taking an error that happens and then applying a fix to it that Copilot recommends. That's called Copilot Autofix. It aligns with GitHub Advanced Security as well. So one of the things that's really exciting about this is the Copilot of GitHub can index essentially your code repositories and then look for those security baseline problems across your code repositories and then recommend fixes to those problems. So what a great capability for us, right? Because like we would never be able to really truly understand everything that we have in our full repo. I can apply some intelligence across that to be able to look for those kinds of problems and remediate them, and then suggest recommendations to that to the code that needs to be remediated. So this is pretty cool. I think it's just another great asset for developers to be more effective. Certainly additional ingestion of Defender in cloud. That's just what I was mentioning as well, around scanning connected repositories and providing critical feedback around those repositories. So this is a new capability for Microsoft Defender for Cloud, very much tied to operating and engaging a successful development effort. If you want to know about the Azure DevOps and GitHub integration roadmap, boom, here it is. So this was something that I always wonder about. I'm always curious about, like, you've got two things. How are you integrating these together? This is a link to go check out that public roadmap of how those integrations are continuing to progress. I think you probably find that useful if you are investing time in either one of those two places. If you built everything in GitHub and all your repos there, maybe you don't care as much about Azure DevOps anymore. Or if you're on the Azure DevOps side and you're like, man, I want to take advantage of the stuff that's happening on the sort of GitHub Copilot, GitHub space. How are those integrating together? This is a good space for you to learn more about that. Okay, now we're getting into some really wild stuff. They talked about quantum computing, and I was always like, when are they going to talk more about that again? Like it always feels like something that's like so close but so far away. And if you really want to go nerd out, like there's a whole session on quantum computing, and they did announce that Atom Computing and Microsoft are bringing to market a powerful, they call it the most powerful quantum machine. But one of the things that's really important about it is Microsoft has a different approach to quantum computing that brings in, to summarize this very quickly, brings in an error checking capability that that builds more stable qubits. Okay, so like, what's the problem in quantum computing? Qubits are really unstable. So to scale it, you need an enormous number of qubits. So the way Microsoft's attacking this is because of the stability of the qubit they're building, they need less qubits to create a stable quantum machine. Why is that important? Quantum computing will allow us to solve problems we can never think of solving before, and also makes vulnerable certain types of things that weren't vulnerable before, because we can solve math problems that we weren't available. Like cryptography, for example, is very vulnerable to quantum computing. So they talked about like the evolution of that in the context of being able to solve certain types of problems. Not going to go into this in any more detail right now, but grab the deck and you'll be able to explore this. And there's a whole session on it. It was super fascinating. It's worth your time if you're into innovation and want to explore like where tech is going as quantum computing becomes a thing. Okay, so I'm going to spend the rest of the time on the Azure platform and some Azure and Windows platform as we kind of dial in toward the end here. So Azure platform, we already know it's everywhere. It's launching in regions all over the place. There's one launching in my backyard in Pleasant Prairie, right? Like it is all over the place. So like it's getting to a point where like there's an Azure region everywhere. But there's also capacity needs, and there's a goal around associating in supporting that capacity. One of the things they talked about at Ignite is the management tooling that's surrounding the Azure experience called Azure Arc. And that's inside of existing machines in Azure. But the big announcement was this idea of Azure Arc for every connected device, whether it's in your data center or in Azure. That Azure Arc becomes a centralized management tool that supports all platforms, including something they announced called Azure Local. Azure Local is an ability to have essentially a local Azure data center. They used to call it Azure Stack, which was like super confusing. Like, what do you mean, the Azure Stack? Like, yeah, like, you mean the thing that's local to the data center? No, the Azure Stack. Like, it's just, it was a stupid name. Now they call it Azure Local, which is like essentially a local version of an Azure data center in your data center that looks like and feels like it's an Azure region, except it's in your physical facility. So Azure, that's what Azure Local is. For both of those, you have access to tools like Azure Update Manager. Why should you care about this? Because you shouldn't be using Configuration Manager to patch machines anymore. So if you are, that's a kind of a reminder like, oh, wait, shoot, like Configuration Manager really isn't the tool to patch machines anymore. I should be using things like Azure Update Manager. Now, why is that something that is important to know? A, just simply because SCCM Configuration Manager is receding. B, they're making this free to everyone that has, well, free. If you have a licensing agreement for your Windows server, you can use Azure Update Manager. So let me show you that. I'm just jumping ahead here. There it is. Okay. So this is the Azure benefits now available to every organization that has licensed software assurance. So Update Manager, change tracking, machine configuration, remote support, site recovery configuration, all these things become available to every machine in your fleet. So why is this worthwhile? Because you need to move away from using Configuration Manager in the first place, but it also ingests a whole set of other capabilities for you that you can take advantage of in the context of your data center ecosystem. So this, I think, is probably if there was one take-home point associated with the Azure ecosystem, it was lots of management tooling, and it's available for you even if you're not in Azure, which is really the key point. I'll let you guys kind of peruse the deck around some of the other things they have in the management space. One of those is just like around migration and modernization and cost management. Lots of cool things that happen there. Very, very useful, very meaningful conversations. So if you want to double click into that, I'll get all the deck content to you and we'd be happy to talk more about it as well. Okay, something they talked a little bit about for all you IoT fans is Azure IoT Operations. This is about managing all the other assets that exist in your ecosystem. And, they gave an example of like a dairy fridge, like, cool, like we've got this dairy fridge, we want to know what it's doing, I want to connect it to something. This idea that Azure IoT Operations provides this broad view of every connected device inside of my managed ecosystem. Lots of new tooling associated with IoT. So if that's something you're exploring, is like, hey, I have this AI thing I want to do with all my connected devices, but my devices aren't even connected yet. How do I get them connected? This is a space that they've been doing some investment in. So they were showing examples of like being able to track that and see what's happening within the manufacturing ecosystem, or the OT environment, as we were talking about, or the products I sold to my end customers as a product. All that being something I can manage in the context of Azure. Okay, last topic, Windows. Holy smokes, we might actually do this. So Windows. So what is happening with Windows? They released something called Cloud PC, Windows 365, a little while ago. They're calling Cloud PC. They even showed like this little, it must have been about the size of a deck of cards plus maybe another half a deck of cards. Okay, it was like super small. And it's like basically a remote PC, right? So like I put that in and it connects to Windows 365, and there's nothing local. There's nothing on a laptop. It's all Windows 365 off in the other world. Like, well, like, yeah, cool. We've been doing that forever with like Citrix and stuff. This is like a licensing model that's very accessible. And that device is like a really super small form factor to make that happen. So they talked a lot about Cloud PC, a lot of really cool things happening there, both for Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. Windows 365 is essentially a SaaS version of that. So there's some reports talking about like what that looked like. The conditional access controls are just as capable with that as they are with anything else. I thought some interesting policy snapshots associated with being able to apply that via Intune. So basically all of that's managed via Intune. Intune's becoming like the single pane for all that capability. This is your daily reminder that Windows 10 support ends in October 14th, 2025. So you better have a plan to move to Windows 11. And they did talk a lot about like autopilot, deploying with Intune, getting away from this idea of imaging and rolling things out. Like if you haven't had that conversation yet, let's have that conversation. I'd be happy to walk you through how to make that transition. This is an important reminder for now's the time. Go make that change. Oh, shoot, I forgot. I have one more topic. Identity and security. Okay, so Entra. Man, I hate that name, but they did change the name to Entra, no longer called Azure Active Directory. And they did have a lot of cool content around Microsoft Entra in the conversation at Ignite. This is for internal IDs, Entra Suite, the external identities, all of that part of an ecosystem of caring about identity within the ecosystem. And I think this was probably the best view of it. Any employee, any location, any platform, any device, accessing a variety of different things within as an employee, whether SaaS websites or Microsoft 365 or any of the resources I'm using across multiple clouds. There's a great link right there to go learn more about the details of things that came out. They spent time talking about Entra for employee access. They talked about external ID, and they talked about Security Copilot, which has got all sorts of like ways of making that data more accessible. So definitely take a double click into the things that they're talking about regarding the Entra suite. Okay, then I'm not going to cover any of this stuff, but if you know who Mark Rusinovich is, he's the CTO of Azure. He talked about all sorts of interesting Azure incubation sessions. That's like, if there's a session I never miss at Ignite or the MVP Summit or Build, it's Mark Rusinovich's session, because he always talks about like cool stuff they're doing, right? So he talks about like things they're incubating that aren't even in the wild yet or are in the wild, like Dapper or Radius or Drazi, like stuff that like they're either just hitting the wild, or it's things like Radius that are like in Summit, they're just talking about it. So they're getting it out there. It's just interesting topics around like where they're investing future time and how that starts to relate to things that we're going to invest our activities in. So spend some time if you want to like learn about where they're putting new energy into new capabilities to innovate around the Azure ecosystem. Watch Mark Rusinovich's session. I put a bunch of like slides of that in here. I'm just going to plow through them real quick just so you can kind of see it. They're there. You talked about confidential AI, which is fascinating. Confidential clean rooms. Talking about confidential computing, which is like executing data in use controls. Tons of cool stuff. So it was totally worth it to watch that. And then I've got other stuff here, which is other Azure infrastructure stuff that he digs into, which I'm not going to cover in this session, but like, holy cow, there's a lot there to experience, like remote storage and Azure container instances, standby pools, and this idea of front door edge actions. So all of that was pretty cool. And holy cow, we actually kind of made it, covering all the rest of that content. So where do we go from here? When you leave, I want you to fill out the survey. Hopefully this was interesting. It sure was interesting for me to put together. Get a copy of the deck. I spent a lot of time putting this together. I want you to have access to it. So click that you want to copy the deck. We would love to bring the event to your company. So what I've been thinking about is I'd love to go to your companies and talk about the topics that were meaningful for you in this. So like if there's a certain area you want to like double click into, explore, think about, or even have us just present this content to your company, we're all in. We love to do that. So feel free to plug us on that or deep dive into any content. And then the last thing is there's a tremendous amount of funding available right now, and especially around Copilot adoption. It won't cover the whole thing usually, but like it is available. So let's take advantage of it. So if you want to simply explore like what are the funding opportunities that Microsoft is giving you to accelerate any one of the things we talked about today, we would love to educate you around what those funding opportunities are. So like if you said, hey, like I've got a plan of deploying Copilot this year, what will Microsoft do to help support that deployment? There are programs that help support that deployment. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about our offering to help accelerate that and make that real. So cool. We almost stayed within our 12. It's 12:01. Thank you, everyone. What a great opportunity for us to talk about some interesting things. Thank you for listening, like to me talk in super speed motion for an hour. And I love to have a follow-up with each of you on any of these things. So let's get some time. Let's talk about it and have an awesome day.